right, it is Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. I'm your host, Cindy Howes. So nice to have you along today. We are getting into a conversation with Chris Eldridge, best known for being the guitar player for the Punch Brothers, who won their very first Grammy this year with their latest record, All Ashore. Before we get into what Chris and I talk about, let's thank our sponsors for Basic Folk. Basic Folk receives support from Mick Dean, songwriters who love each other. Mick Dean would be delighted to send you a free CD of their first EP, The Sampler Plate. Email lin@mcdean.co, lin@mcdean.co to get one. Like I said, Chris Eldridge won his first Grammy this year with the Punch Brothers, and Chris has been nominated 8 times between the Punch Brothers, the Seldom Scene, and also his work with the guitarist Julian Lage. This award was long in the making. Chris Eldridge goes by the nickname Critter, grew up around bluegrass. His dad was a member of the Seldom Scene, and Critter was around a lot of influential players when he was younger. After college, he was also a member of the Seldom Scene with his father. Then he was in a group called the infamous String Dusters, and during that time, that is when Critter met Chris Thile, who eventually approached him about joining his project, the Punch Brothers, and then Critter had to make the very hard decision as to whether or not he was going to do infamous String Dusters or the Punch Brothers, but in the end, the Punch Brothers were the band that he chose. In our conversation, Critter talks about how he unsuccessfully tried his hand initially on the electric guitar, could not get a grasp on it. It's pretty funny. His mom gave him this Tony Rice record. He picked up the acoustic and then kind of took it from there. He also talks about how Tony Rice unintentionally revived his childhood nickname back into his adult and professional life. Hilarious story. He is a wonderful human being. Also want to say that Critter's interview on Basic Folk was recorded on 3 Mile Island in New Hampshire. No, not that 3 Mile Island, but it is a little island on Lake Winnipesaukee where we were both at Miles of Music Camp, which is this wonderful folk-oriented camp founded in part by his partner Kristen Andreasen and also Laura Cortese. You can hear some like nature sounds in the background, some birds. You can also hear kind of like a vocal warm-up at some point in the interview, which is pretty hilarious, and like people kind of walking back and forth because his cabin was kind of like on a main drag, but it's fun. We're going to take a listen to a song that appears on his record with Julian Lage, the record Avalon. We're going to take a listen to the song Butter and Eggs, and then we'll get into our conversation with Chris Eldridge on Basic Folk. Okay, cool. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Pumped. So I wanted to talk about both of your parents.
Cool.
To start things off. Your dad, Ben Eldridge, is a well-known banjo player in the bluegrass group Seldom Scene. Mm-hmm. So you must have had tons of music happening in your childhood. So can you talk a little bit about how music shaped your childhood?
Yeah, well, music was just, it was a huge part of my childhood. Yeah, my father used to play in this band called the Seldom Scene. He retired a few years ago, I guess in 2016. But yeah, before that he was in this band, since 1971, And I was born in 1982, so I very much grew up like going to concerts. And the Seldom Scene is a great band, you know. There's like wonderful bluegrass band. So I grew up around great music being made by people who I knew. So music to me, and playing music always seemed like a very natural thing. There's nothing weird about it. Not like you're jumping off a cliff or anything to like play a song or play an instrument.
It wasn't weird, but like, did it feel special, or did it just feel normal?
I think eventually for me it became special, but at first it was like eating dinner or something like that.
Yeah,
it's just like a thing that you do because you're a person. And so that was kind of my dad's scene, and I was around all these great musicians. I got to, you know, Tony Rice and Bill Monroe and all the Seldom Scene guys, and just all kinds of people were just sort of around. But my mom had her mom, and actually both of her parents, kind of got together through a love of classical music. They were huge like classical music nuts. It's kind of what initially kind of drew them together. Neither one of them played, but they were just like so passionate about it. And
did they own records or go
they
orchestras and stuff?
Yeah, like all that
everything,
stuff.
Yeah.
And so music was like almost more of a religion on that side of the family. And we listened to all kinds of stuff. My mom and I, driving in the car, would listen to everything. You know, we'd listen to Glenn Gould. We'd listen to Oscar Peterson.
Glenn Gould, is that classical?
Yeah, he's a great classical pianist who made these like really wonderful records of Bach back in the like late 50s. They kind of set the world on fire back then. They were almost like breakout things, kind of bumped out of the classical bubble. And actually, my grandfather hated Glenn Gould for the record.
He was kind of like,
he was a little more trad,
experimental. Okay.
But my grandmother and my mom and I, we all like totally loved Glenn Gould.
Oh, that's so cool.
But you know, it was that and like musical theater records and Joni Mitchell and just like, you know, the Pointer Sisters. I remember we had this Pointer Sisters CD in the car, Graceland by Paul Simon. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that we would just listen to a bunch at home. So it was cool. Like I had, you know, bluegrass on one side because that's what my dad played and the Seldom Scene played, and that's the music that I was around being made in person. But then we were always listening to all this other diverse, really cool music. I think I learned slightly different things about music from both of them. But yeah, I mean, my mom always had like a really open mind. My dad has an open mind too, but he definitely has the things that he likes, and like I definitely know when he doesn't like something. You know, it's like, and
how does he feel about the Punch Brothers?
I think, to be totally honest, I think in the early days they were just like, "What is this? Like, what are you doing?" You had a perfectly good bluegrass band, but I think now they've come to appreciate, like my dad and kind of portion of the family have come to appreciate that it's a cool thing, you know, and that we really work on. We're trying to make our own music that we haven't really heard before. We're trying to fill a void that for us was there and we could kind of sort of perceive, and we've kind of tried to poke our way slowly through the dark and fill that void. And so I think they've kind of come to appreciate it for that reasons. And also the band has been, you know, we've done pretty well for ourselves. So I think they've kind of been like, okay, there's some sense of vindication.
Bluegrass, of course, was everywhere for you when you were a kid, but did you actually like bluegrass?
Yeah, as a kid, I loved it. You know, I mean, some of my most potent memories of music are memories of the Seldom Scene, like just being at shows and hearing John Duffy, who was their ultra legendary tenor singer and mandolin player. He used to play with the Country Gentlemen, but Duffy and Mike Eldridge, who was like the, you know, one of the great. He's on the Mount Rushmore of the dobro. You know, it's like probably Josh Graves, Mike, and Jerry Douglas are like the three biggest icons on that instrument. So I was around these guys, and not to mention everybody else in the band. I'm just singling them out, but like the band was amazing. So growing up, I mean, I just heard this stuff, and it got seared into my brain, and it was really good, and I loved it. And when I got a little bit older, when I started actually getting a little more interested in music, I think, when I was probably like 9 or 10, I started wanting to kind of rebel maybe a little bit against what my parents were up to. Like, I didn't want to play string band music. I wanted electric guitars, and I wanted drums, and I wanted volume, and all that stuff.
Right.
So I got into kind of some other stuff, but I was really, and I got into guitar. My friend Jay Starling, whose father John Starling, who just passed away, but was one of the most incredible singers ever in bluegrass. Jay was 2.5 years older than me, and he was my hero. I wanted to be just like Jay Starling, and so when he started playing guitar, I wanted to play guitar, and that meant I was going to play electric guitar, and I did that and was like really pretty lousy at it for a while. But I kind of stumbled back into bluegrass some years later when my mom got me this Tony Rice record. This one that wound up being kind of a pivotal moment for me and bringing me back into the acoustic music that it turned out I could kind of play. I sort of understood it, whereas I kind of really flailed along at the electric guitar stuff.
That's so funny.
Yeah. It's true, though. It's really true.
So something else that came up in reading about how you learned guitar was that it was like a very solitary experience for you.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're like collaborating basically all the time. Can you talk about that juxtaposition of those two experiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, I still kind of take solace in music as like a solo kind of meditative enterprise. I mean, I'm kind of an introvert. I love people and I love being among people, but like I can get kind of worn out relatively quickly if I'm around people too much, and I just kind of need just to be by myself. And so like the guitar for me and music is can be a great refuge. And I've always appreciated it for that reason. It's this thing you can kind of just meditate into. You can kind of zen into it. It's like, and especially as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate it more practicing as a practice, sort of almost the way someone would speak about like a meditation practice. And I wish I actually practiced more than I do. A lot of times it seems like there's just enough other stuff going on in life that's keeping me from...
Just like someone who meditates.
Probably, yeah. Like, I don't have time. Yeah.
But have 5 minutes to sit down and think of nothing.
Yeah. But to me, the guitar is like playing music is really cool for that same reason. It is sort of this solitary thing, and also a lot of the musicians, for whatever kind of unrelated to that, I think, but a lot of the musicians who I really found myself attracted to when I was a boy were these kind of like virtuoso kind of instrumentalist people who had like a really clear vision and a really clear voice through their instrument. I mean, I've always, I love James Taylor or Joni Mitchell, the people with these like great voices. I've always loved that, but I was songs for me personally, meaning music that has words, that always came second, which I know is like, I'm very much in the minority of people. Most people are like words first and the music is kind of whatever. For me, I was very much music first. And so a lot of the people who I really admired the most and just kind of wanted to be like were these instrumentalists. And I feel like, and they were great at being instrumentalists. There was this high level of ability, and not that it's not that the ability was what drew me in the first place, but I think I always kind of understood that was like, for what I was trying to do, that was like sort of a prerequisite, that you had to like sort of climb a bit of a mountain and become a good player. And so that was, that also led to a lot of hours by myself. It was just trying to work on that, not just kind of strive towards something.
There's like as far as I can understand, there was an interesting switch where you were trying to play electric guitar like Eric Clapton and the Allman Brothers, but then you couldn't really latch onto it the way that you discovered when you discovered Tony Rice and David Grisman. Is that true? Yeah.
I mean, it was at that point I'd kind of moved on to some like kind of weirder music like, I mean, the Allman Brothers and Clapton were like first mover kind of electric guitar stuff, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then as time went on, I kind of got into like more kind of like progressive or like kind of jazz music. I got into Chick Corea and Return to Forever and the Flecktones, which kind of Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, which is kind of close to the world that I grew up in. And there was this guy, this electric guitar player who I kind of had forgotten about, but I just realized recently that I loved this guy when I was young. And this guy, Joe Satriani, who's like a shredder.
Yeah.
But
what
like,
does he do? He does like the G3 tour.
Yeah, he did that, and it was like for a long time I was like, man, that stuff is whack. I want to do like music that's like more, but whatever. That guy is awesome. I think. Someone sent me a Joe Satriani song the other day. It's like that we used to listen to when we were kids, and it was just so good. His whole concept and his idea was so clear, and actually, it was really beautiful and melodic, and it has like this incredible like soul and feel to it. This stuff, which is why I think it kind of captured my imagination when I was a boy. And it's funny, I kind of like lost touch with that for a while. But just recently, I was like, wait, no, that was cool music. That was good stuff. Everybody else's opinions be damned. Everybody else's snobby opinions be damned, by the way. So. So I was getting more into that kind of stuff, and I really just was lousy at it. But it was kind of expanding my mind, you know. And I think when I got the Tony Rice record, she got me this record called Acoustics, which was an instrumental record. Back in the '70s, he was playing bluegrass, like straight ahead bluegrass, doing some solo stuff, and most notably, he played in a band with Ricky Skaggs and J.D. Crowe and Jerry Douglas and this guy Bobby Sloan. This J.D. Crowe and the New South. And they were this really iconic bluegrass band who sort of redefined this way that you could play bluegrass. Really, they just played so in time. Their grooves were so solid and they sang so in tune, and all the gestures were so clear. And it was the musicianship was just so high. It was so elevated above the music, the bluegrass that had come before it. Not that it was better music, but it was just different. They were kind of working on some different stuff. So Tony had really been kind of associated with this like pretty straight ahead bluegrass, even though they were kind of cutting their own thing, their own path. It was bluegrass. And then he met David Grisman, the great mandolinist, and Grisman had this idea for instrumental string band music that was kind of bringing in new influences. And I'm sure, you know, he probably wouldn't have talked about it that way. But functionally, you know, it was like harmonically, it was a little more interesting. The songs had more clear structure and more complex structures. And it was music.
You had your guitar so you could
I know.
hear
well,
what you're talking about.
I do, but I don't even know if I could like really, if I could like, I don't know if I could really capture like the David Grisman thing on here.
Is there any way to like sing it or something just to like get an
Here,
idea?
I do have my guitar.
Oh well.
So like, with J.D. Crowe and the New South, you know, they were playing, you know, bluegrass, like the classic song that they did, which I don't know, but I know the melody sort of, and I probably know a few words, is the Old Home Place. It's like, it's been 10 long years since I left my home on a cabin where I was born, something like that. And the hot foxwood blows his horn. Anyway, it's like bluegrass, you know, kind of stuff.
So that's like the straightforward.
Ish. I mean, they were cutting their own path. I mean, and to this day, that music is still influential because they did something a little different. But to my perspective, or from my perspective, it's still kind of pretty relatively traditional. But like the David Grisman Quintet was playing music. Like there's this song, Fishgale. It's a weird rhythm. And here's the melody. It's like this weird, but you have this whole string band playing it, and they kind of built it so that the music made a little more sense than probably that sounded like it made. But clearly that's a very different kind of thing than what we were just playing.
Yeah.
And so Tony got kind of captivated by Grissman's concept and moved out to California and played, they called it dog music. That was like their name for David Grissman's music,
dog.
D-A-W-G. And then Tony started making some solo records and kind of exploring his concept of that branch of music, you know. And that's the CD that my mom gave me was of one of those Tony Rice solo records where he was just playing this instrumental music that was kind of had more sophisticated harmony. The rhythms were a little more sophisticated than bluegrass, but it was still like fundamentally string band music. It was still rooted like in the most core part of its DNA. That bluegrass kind of rhythm, that bluegrass drive was still in there. That was when I was really able to kind of like focus in and hone in and start kind of figuring out what he was doing and decoding the music. And I found a lot of focus when I found that music.
And how did you actually get to study with Tony Rice?
Well, he and my father were buddies. Like Tony actually almost joined the Seldom Scene back in the day, back in the mid '70s. And instead of joining the Seldom Scene, he wound up, to make a long story short, wound up moving out west and joining the David Grissman Quintet. There were a couple other pieces to that story, but that's the short answer, is he was going to join the scene. And my dad played on one of his early solo records, and when Tony would come to D.C., he would crash on the family's couch. This is before I was born, but so they're just kind of old friends, and so I kind of knew him growing up. It was Tony. I didn't think much of him. He was just like some dude who was kind of around, and it was when I got a little older that I started appreciating his music and listening to his music that I was just kind of dumbfounded by it, because he's such a profound, beautiful musician.
Yeah. When your mom gave you the Tony Rice record, were you like, oh, it's Tony? Or were you like, oh, I'll listen to this? His music always meant so much to her specifically, and that was something that we would listen to in the car. I mean, his music was kind of pretty omnipresent in my life, whether I was conscious of it or not. But then, she gave that to me at a really key point in my development, as a guitar player. I was like this young guy who was getting into guitar and wanting to play guitar in this certain way. And that record, Acoustics, just fired me up. I don't think I'd ever heard that particular side of Tony's music. I'd heard a lot of the vocal music. That's what we were mostly listening to. But there was just this incredible virtuosity and clarity of thought and this amazing rhythmic drive that music had that was just so cool. I loved it kind of immediately. Yeah. All right. I read somewhere that Tony Rice gave you the nickname Critter, but then Sharon of Rick and Sharon told me a different story. So what is the origin?
This actually... There's a third part of that actually has to do with Miles of Music, or it's related to Miles of Music, where we're doing this remote podcasting from. So yes, everybody called me, before I was born, when I was in utero, my parents referred to me as the Critter. They were just like, oh, the Critter's kicking again. I don't know if they figured out I was going to be Christopher yet or whatever, but they called me the Critter. And then apparently when I was born, people still do, and I am Christopher. I'm Christopher Curtin Eldridge, and so.
Wait, what's your middle name?
Curtin.
Oh, I thought you said Curtin.
Yeah, no, Curtin, C-U-R-T-I-N. My social security number, by the way.
Oh, yes.
No.
What's your mother's maiden name?
Yeah, it's but yeah, so they just called me Critter because it's not so far off of Christopher, and my family calls me Christopher for the most part, which they're the only people in the world who ever called me that, but they still call me that. It's kind of nice. So they called me Critter, and it kind of went away, by the time I was, 5, 7 years old. When I was kind of getting to be a slightly bigger kid, they started calling me Chris. And interestingly enough, I went to Merle Fest my freshman year in college. I went to Oberlin College, where when I was a freshman, Zach Hickman, who is here at the camp, and plays bass with Josh Ritter and has done all kinds of stuff. Played
Previous
music.
guest on this podcast.
Oh, okay. So you guys already know Zach. Yeah. Zach's the best. So Zach caught wind. Oh, right. We went to Merle Fest when I was in college, and Tony called me Critter. He was just like, he was the one vestigial human still calling me Critter. You know. He was like, "Hey, Critter, what's shaking?" You know. And and some of my other college friends who were there, Zach didn't go on that trip. They heard him calling me Critter all weekend, and so
how could you not love that?
Yeah, which was cool, and like I didn't think much of it, but Zach Hickman caught wind of this when we got back from Merle Fest that year, back to school. Zach caught wind that Tony Rice called me Critter, and he was like, "Critter, that's the perfect nickname for you. That's who you are. You're Critter." And then so Zach really brought that to the fore. Really started calling me Critter, and then he started.
This was at Oberlin.
This is at Oberlin.
Yeah.
He started a band, a quartet that was that later turned into the infamous String Dusters. This band called Stable Horse, which was me and Chris Pandolfi and Andy Hall, who are the banjo player and dobro player for the String Dusters, and Zach. And it was called Stable Horse, and we had a band now with two Chris's, and so, you know, it just made life easier for me to be Critter, which Zach was already advocating for, I think, anyway. And it just kind of took over. And I've always been, then once I left the String Dusters, I was in a band with Chris Thiele. So
Two Chris's.
So
Yeah.
the Critter thing just became very, strongly set in stone.
Yeah. So you were in the Seldom Scene for a little while. Was your dad also in that band?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like for you to be in a band with him?
It was awesome. It was really fun because he and my mom got divorced when I was very young. I was 4, and they always were. They were friendly. It was cool. We lived 4 blocks apart on the same street. Like my mom was 209 on this street. My dad was 609, and so it was cool. Like from a very young age, I could walk and move freely from one house to the other. But I grew up at my mom's house. Like that's basically where I lived, and I would go with my dad sometimes on weekends if he'd have a show or something. But once I got older and started playing music more, that really became this cool thing that we could share together, where we'd go to a show and play together. We'd travel on the road. We'd drive to, you know, Lexington, Kentucky from Fredericksburg, where we grew up, and like we'd just drive there and play the gig and hang out and drive back. And I got to do this for, full time for maybe a couple of years, and then kind of part time when I was in college. Nepotism was strong, so I'd like sit in with the band if they were close by. Or
how good of a guitar player were you at that time?
You know, it's. I don't think I was embarrassing myself. But I also would not have earned a slot on the stage by my merits alone, considering they'd never had like a guy who played guitar like that. You know, there was no reason for them to have someone doing what I was doing there.
You met Chris Thiele in 2005 when you were in infamous String Dusters.
That's correct. Well, the Dusters were just I don't even know if we had solidified our name at that point, but yeah.
But it seems like you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had to make a choice between Punch Brothers and the String Dusters?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, basically. Mm-hmm.
Was that hard?
It was very hard.
Yeah.
That was wound up being like an extremely painful chapter of my life because I was very close to the guys in the String Dusters. I loved them very dearly. They were kind of like brothers to me. And the band is a great band. It was like an awesome string band. And we had all kind of been talking about doing this band for a long time. And I was like, they were waiting for me to get out of college, and then we were going to all move to Nashville and start this band, which is what happened. And pretty soon thereafter, like when we finally got Travis Book, who was the bass player in the band, that was right around the time we were trying to figure out who our bass player was going to be. because Alan Bartram, this is probably really boring, but it's a little bit of history that I don't think has been documented. Alan Bartram, who's this great bass player who now plays with the Del McCoury Band, was the original bass player in the String Dusters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Alan was an original member of the band, and he had a good gig at the time with playing with Kenny and Amanda Smith, and didn't want to join the Dusters. So we had to figure out, okay, this guy's not in it, and we're really going to be in it. We're going to do this band like for real. This is going to be our band, which is that attitude was part of why it wound up being so hard when I left. And then we found we remembered Travis. We had this great jam session with Travis. So Travis came out to Nashville in April of 2005 for his kind of first rehearsal and kind of tryout with the band. And we played, it went well, and we were like, I think this is our guy. And he came back. I think he played his first gig with the band, having moved to Nashville, at the Station Inn in July of 2005, which was the same month that Thiele called basically to form what would become Punch Brothers. So it was like the timing kind of was sort of similar, but it was, the Dusters predated it by a bit, but we'd been talking about it and dreaming about it for so long. That when I wound up kind of being faced with this choice of like, I can't actually do both. Both of these bands want to be like real full-time things.
Yeah.
And I just felt like my potential for musical growth was higher with Thiele and those guys. Because the music that we kind of came together to play was so far beyond anything I could have imagined at that point. And that was always kind of one of the things for me about music. Part of that monastic thing that I was talking about loving earlier when we were talking is just that sense of growth and development. Like that to me is like, that's part of, you just kind of keep moving forward, and that's part of what I'm in it for. It's not to be the best anything, but just to keep developing personally. And that was kind of an unparalleled opportunity for that sort of thing. And so, it wound up being really tough, but I left the band, and there was lots of resentment and tough vibes for a while, but which are all in the past now. But it was tough. It was tough.
All right, you ready to talk about the Grammys?
Oh gosh. Okay, sure.
Punch Brothers been nominated 6 or 7 times.
I don't even
You
know.
were nominated with Seldom Scene 1 time, and Julian Lage 1 time. So something like 9 Grammy nominations.
Yeah.
For you, and no Grammys for Critter until this year.
Yeah, we finally brought one home. I think it was the 8th one. 8th one's the charm. It was a surprise. I mean, so there were only 3 of us there. It was me and Noam and Gabe. So Thiele and Paul Cohort were not there because we just thought, oh, there's no way we're gonna win.
It was like the 7th time.
Well, yeah, and we're in the folk category with Joan Baez on her farewell record. Like, I see. And we're not even like a folk. I don't know what you call Punch Brothers, but I mean, I guess we're as much a folk band as we are anything else. But, it would just seem so certain. It's like Joan Baez, folk category, farewell record. That's done. We'll just enjoy the party and go. Have a nice night in L.A.
Right.
but then they called our name, and it was like a serious surprise.
Who got on the mic and was like, "Well, it's about time."
Noam. Well, Noam is very funny, right? Noam literally could have a career as a comedy writer. Yeah. Straight up, and so he got up there and said, folks, this award is it's really wow, it's really overdue. Then he proceeded to roast Thiele and Paul, who for not coming. Yeah,
that's really funny.
But yeah,
is that just like off the cuff? He didn't plan that.
We were sitting in the seats, and like a few categories before ours came up. He nudged Gabbers. He's like, "Wait, what if we actually win this thing? Like, I should have something to say. We need to figure out who to thank." So I think Pickles, his brain started scrambling, 10 minutes before we walked up, and Gabbers.
Nickname Pickles.
Pickles is Noam. Yeah, Noam Pikelny, Pickles, and then Gabbers, Gabe Witcher is Gabbers. And Gabbers started, putting down people we knew we needed to thank. This wasn't gonna. We weren't gonna win. I mean, that wasn't like it wasn't gonna happen. But But it was good. I'm just really grateful that he got to roast the other two guys in the band.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh man, what changes for you now that you have a Grammy?
Absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I've got a new thing that I'm gonna have to figure out, find a box for when we move. But that's about it. Like,
How heavy is it?
oh, I don't know. It's like, Kristen, how heavy is that thing? How heavy is that damn thing? I don't know. It's like 5 pounds, 10 pounds.
It's just like a good
50, I don't know. Yeah.
Solid 5 pounds.
It's like a heavy kitten.
Yeah,
It's like a heavy kitten.
Heavy kitten, and it's awesome. And then I think like the biggest dilemma is like where to display it that feels like both respectful of the honor and not narcissistic.
I have a friend
walking that line.
who has the best solution for that. He has a Grammy, and what he did is he put it on his toilet. He put it on the top of the toilet
Like on the tank.
On the tank, because so you're not. People are thinking that like you're not taking yourself too seriously, but everyone sees it.
Right. I think Elton John does that too.
Does he?
Yeah.
Is that Elton's thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Put your Grammys in the bathroom. Is this your main guitar?
This is the one that I wind up playing out the most. It's got a pickup in it. This was my main guitar for years, and now it's the one that I use, on Live for Here and with Punch Brothers. Basically, when I'm using a pickup, I rarely record with it.
Is it the 1939?
No, this is a 1954 D28.
So
Martin.
I read an article where Julian Lage, who you played with, you've recorded with him, he was talking about how one of the reasons your playing together works is that your guitars are really good friends, which is like so sweet.
Yeah, we've wound up like trying a bunch of things out over the years, but yeah, I've got a 1939 D28 and he's got a 1939 00018, and those two guitars kind of nest together really well, like almost like Russian dolls. It's like my guitar has kind of this big, it's it can do stuff, but it's kind of got this big low end, and his kind of tucks right in there, and they complement each other well.
So I also read that the serial numbers are like 600 away. So is it possible they were made like right around, like in the same?
Oh yeah, I
by
mean
the same person.
Oh,
maybe?
definitely. I mean, all those guitars were made. It was a small factory back then, So, yeah, they were definitely made by the same people.
That's cool.
For sure. And the fact that they are so close. I mean, when serial numbers get to be like 10, 20, even 50 serial numbers apart, you can bet that two guitars. Because Martin, they came out sequentially. They were stamped sequentially. And so a lot of those will be made from the same piece of wood. And a piece of wood definitely has a sound. Like
the same tree?
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you play two guitars from the same batch, they will tend to have a very similar voice, which is kind of weird and cool how like whatever that tree went through that put the sap in it in this particular way, or however it works, like it's a real thing. They'll sound the same. They sound like siblings.
Julian also described you as one of the most open-minded, willing, dangerous guitar players there is, and also
that's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Also, that playing with you was an empathetic experience.
Well, hopefully that part's true. I try to one of my things that I try to do as a member of an ensemble or a musician. This is one of the things that Tony Rice taught me when I was young was. This idea that you want to make everybody else sound good. You want to make everything around you sound good. The idea is to collaborate with your fellow musician to make like pleasant sounds, whatever that means. I mean, and that could be pleasant. Doesn't mean that it has to sound smooth or anything. I mean, it could sound jagged and angular and out of tune, even if that's kind of what the music wants. But like, but that your gig is to like collaborate and make music with people. And so that's a thing that with Julian and everybody, that's kind of something I always try and make happen, is just like make other people sound better and feel better when they're playing music.
The other day, you were talking in a class here at Miles of Music Camp about how important it is to listen to the other players.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that? And maybe, I'm not a musician, but I definitely, that resonated with me as like somebody who interviews people. Like one of the most important parts about interviewing somebody is listening, but that definitely was a skill for me to develop.
Right.
What's been your path with learning that very lesson about listening?
Well, I think, well, again, that piece of advice that Tony gave me was like, came at a good time, because when I was 19, you know, I was kind of on this mission to become this like, you know, crazy guitar player. But, you know, I kind of realized that, I don't know, that like, I was just more interested in trying to make music that was good and complete and whole. And the way to best do that is just, you can't do that unless you're listening. I mean, it's like, if you're not actively, as a musician, if you're not actively using your ears to listen to what's going on around you, and yet you're participating in this art form that's like completely aural. I mean, there can be a visual or experiential component to it. You know, you can watch someone play a song and that can kind of enhance it. But I don't think anyone would argue that a blind person couldn't experience music on the same level that a sighted person could. So if that's true, it's like, it's this thing that happens really through sound. And it's like, so you have to be just listening. You have to be taking in the entire canvas and the entire picture of what's happening on, because it develops in real time. You know, it's not like a painting where it's just there, it's this static thing. By the way, if it were a painting, that would be like painting with your eyes closed, you know, if you weren't listening. But you just have to be engaged, and you have to try and hear and love the music that you're hearing, and hopefully contribute in a way that you love to the music that you're hearing. Like, you want to not just focus in on your part. You want to not just focus in on the other person's part or the other people's part. You want to kind of rise above and listen to it all. You want to hear it all happening. And I feel like that's, when you get in that place, you're in a place where it's not about you, and it's not about any of that stuff. It's just about being present, and it's about the music being good, hopefully, and supporting the music. Music is this external thing that's more important than any person there.
All right, can you stick around for the lightning round?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll be right back. Basic Folk is brought to you in part by Tina and Her Pony, a queer duo bringing traditional Appalachian music and vocal harmonies into the 21st century. Visit tinaandherpony.com. And thanks to WIUP in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which airs Basic Folk 2 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. You can listen on 90.1 if you're in the Indiana, PA area, or at their website, wiupfm.org. All right, Critter, are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's the lightning round.
Okay.
All right, these are fun questions. You give me one word or one sentence answers. We just get it like lightning.
Okay.
All right, ready?
All right.
Dogs or cats or something
Dogs.
else? Okay. What is your coffee order?
Matcha latte.
Favorite
with
US...
oat milk. Sorry, it's really bougie.
Favorite U.S. city?
New York. Well, or New Orleans, but probably New York.
First album you bought with your own money?
Oh, God. I don't know, but I think the first album I ever had was MC Hammer, Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Him.
The room likes that.
Uh-huh.
What was your first concert?
Seldom Scene.
Dream collaboration?
Oh. I would have said Julian Lage, but we play together, so that's really crazy. I don't know. Oh, Jim Keltner. I'd love to play with Jim Keltner sometime.
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Oh, you're a good kid.
I love the Stones too, but Beatles.
Totally. Okay, do you like smooth or chunky peanut butter?
I prefer, boy, that's tough. It really depends on the mood. I can go either way, honestly. They both have their place in my life.
Flying or invisibility?
Flying.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Wars.
What is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Most beautiful place I've ever visited. I don't know. I mean, this is gonna sound real cheesy, but because I can't think of a spot. It's the number of places that are awesome are overwhelming. I can't think of them. But I was just looking through a telescope the other day here. One of our campers here at Camp Noah brings a telescope every year, and we were checking out Jupiter, and it had all these crazy moons, and you could actually see it with your eye looking through the telescope. That was pretty insane. That'd be kind of fun.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
Critter, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yes. Good stuff from Chris Eldridge. Wonderful human being. Cannot wait to see him again. And check out the Punch Brothers. Check out Julian Lage. Check out everything that Chris Eldridge has ever done. Thanks to Laura McCarthy for producing Basic Folk. Lindsay Myers is our business manager. Alex Stanton of Townspeople does our music. I'm your host, Cindy Howes. You can check out our newsletter. You can sign up for it at cindyhouse.net. There's also a Facebook group called Basic Folk Basics. You can sign up for it. Check it out. Thanks a lot for listening. Tell all your friends that you listen to the best folk music podcast in the world and that they need to listen to it too. Everybody listen to Basic Folk. Okay, thanks. Bye.